Hey guys, it's Bree. I wanted to do this video with martini, but all I had was white wine, and so I figured that was probably the best option after a martini. Because today we're going to be talking about The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. Go ahead, get yourself a drink. This is a love letter to Mary Robinette Kowal. The Calculating Stars is a fantastic read. That is the first thing I'm going to say, and if it is the only thing you come out of here remembering, it is go read The Calculating Stars. Mary Robinette Kowal has always been somebody whose works I've loved, but this book spoke to my soul. It really touched something in me that felt seen for one of the very few times in kind of my literary life, and I cannot thank her enough for having done so. The Calculating Stars is about a woman named Elma York, and Elma works for essentially a predecessor to what would have been NASA. Elma is a brilliant Jewish mathematician who hails from the East Coast. She was a WASP, or essentially a pilot during World War I, and she is on vacation with her husband when a meteorite hits the East Coast and basically destroys like a third of America. She manages to survive by pure chance. Her husband is NACA, which is the predecessor organization's lead engineer, and they're horrified. The sea is literally bubbling. The people who they've known and loved their entire lives are gone. And then, using her kind of skills at mathematics and her brother's expertise in meteorology, Elma has to break it to basically the world that they're gonna die, that this is an extinction-sized event, and that if they don't continue the space program, they're all doomed. Just because Elma is smart doesn't mean that she doesn't have all of the problems that are involved with being a woman and brilliant in the 1940s. She is consistently overlooked by her peers. She is resented by the men who ought to respect her and who would do so if she were a man. She is kind of constantly pushed to be a stay-at-home mom, wife, kind of fit into that traditional role, and she just doesn't. And on top of that, Elma is really good friends with a number of Black women in her community, some of whom are also very brilliant. And so she is juggling the racial dynamics of that situation, of wanting women's equality, wanting equality for the women who she has in her life, and that sometimes means Black women, and trying to figure out when a small step for women in general is okay if it excludes Black women. There's a very real sense of Elma having to figure out both gender and racial politics at the same time. One of, I think, the most beautiful and brilliant parts, and the parts that really spoke to me about this book, was Elma's own anxiety. Elma was a really brilliant student and went to college at 14. She was kind of held up there as an example by her professors of like, hey, this little girl can do this thing, why can't you big bad men do it? And as a result, she really has a lot of anxiety. That, compounded with her mother's desire to have her live up to the expectations of kind of the quote-unquote perfect daughter, means that she really has a hard time functioning in high-stress environments. Not in high-stress environments where she's kind of relied upon to do the things that she's good at. She can whip out her numbers in high stress like a champ. But when she starts gaining traction as the visible point for the women into space kind of push, she's thrown onto children's shows and talk shows and news networks, and she's in so much stress she can hardly stand it. She's vomiting, she's like pulling at her hair, she's on the verge of a breakdown, and she can't talk to anyone. The plot and the characters in this book are fantastic. Mary Robinette Kowal really captures the idea of what it is like to be a woman who succeeds beyond other people's expectations. I suspect because she has personal experience with it. And she channels some of those really interesting, like, hidden figures, inspirational moments. At the same time, I think she does a fantastic job of portraying anxiety and chronic anxiety. Watching Elma struggle it is so true to my experience that I have so few words to explain it. I went to college when I was 17 and was also probably socially unprepared. I also had a family who was quite concerned at times with doing the quote-unquote right thing. And so I felt so seen. I really felt like Kowal was talking to my experiences, and I cannot underscore how good that feels to see yourself reflected in literature. On top of that, I think that Kowal does a fantastic job of showing the ways that Elma realizes her own flaws. She realizes that she grew up in a world that takes Black women for granted, and that the Black women around her are amazing and brilliant. And she still has to struggle with the fact that sometimes accepting a step forward for women broadly or for white women means leaving Black women behind, and juggling the kind of ethical questions involved. At what point do you accept that this is a good step for women, end of sentence, when you know that it is not a good step for Black women included? And I thought that was a really lovely and complex aspect that Kowal adds to the story. There's also a real sense that this story is speaking to us now. A lot of the conversations in the political world revolving kind of giving funding to these programs, to putting people into space and making sure people actually go to space and building that colony on the moon that will save humanity is surrounded by this conversation about this is not an immediate problem. At first, the world cools down, and then the temperature of the world is going to slowly skyrocket. And I thought that that was interesting and that it reflects a lot of the current conversation about global climate change in America today. And I think the international politics that surround it, because of course it is a mass extinction event and the world is coming together, it is not just America, reflects a similar kind of complicated international politics to that of our current society. Honestly, there's very little that I found not to like about this. There are a couple of moments where maybe the pacing isn't what you'd want. If you are somebody who's very interested in kind of that sense of urgency, you are not going to get this in this because it's going for a vastly different type of emergency. So it's not your action adventure. It's not as broad scope as something like Seven Eves, where you're condensing that entire period of cataclysmic change into 700 pages. This is, 400 pages about the first 5, 6, 7 years of that particular phase of change. There's not actually that drastic collapse that we're seeing in something like Seven Eves. It is much more subtle in that. But frankly, I thought that that was one of its strengths, and I think it actually would complement a book like Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson really, really well. In short, this is easily one of my favorite books. I'm so glad that I have gotten to read it. A big thank you to Tor, who sent this to me. I'm so excited for the next one. This is going to be a part of a duology. The next one is called The Faded Sky, and it comes out pretty soon. In fact, I loved this so much that I'm pretty sure the next thing I'm going to do after I edit this is go ahead and email the publicist at Tor and say, hey, please, dear God, send me the next book, because I think this is easily one of the best books of the year.
Hi everyone, this is Bree. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to this channel for more videos just like this.